Good morning and welcome to C&E Sales Monthly Webinar Series. My name is Tony Belter and I'm Division Specialist here at C&E Advanced Technologies. And today I'm going to talk about the new Banner ABR series barcode readers. There are two different models in the ABR series. There's the Series 3000 and this is a smaller unit. There are several variations of this, and I'll go through the different variations here this morning. And so you can see that this is the form factor of the 3000. This is the USB model, and it's the smallest of the models. And this is the back side of the unit, and so this is where the focus ring is to set this up to read your barcodes. And of course, you can see where the USB cable exits this unit. There is also an Ethernet model of the Series 3000. It's slightly larger. It's a little bit deeper. The other one was the USB was about 31 millimeters deep here, and this is 48. And that's really the only difference, other than the fact that it does have two cables coming out of the back side of the unit. One for Ethernet communications, and then the other cable is for power, serial, and discrete I/O. The little picture to the right here just shows that these units come with these lock stickers. So once you adjust the focus with an Allen wrench to get it to where you've got a good image of your barcode, you can, and you want to keep it there, you can take one of these stickers and place it over this area, and it keeps this unit from drifting, and it keeps other people, hopefully, from going in there and adjusting the focus. Just wanted to let you know that that was available. Here's some of the features of the 3000. There are two different models. There are the USB and serial versions and the Ethernet and serial versions. There are also two resolutions in this series, the 750-480, and the 1.3 megapixel resolution, which is the 1280-960. As of right now, there are just the two lens options, 6 and 9 millimeter. That may change in the future. They also read 1D and 2D codes. But in the Series 3000 family, they do have a reduced cost 1D only model. So if you know you're going to use this to look at only 1D codes, you can save some cost to this unit by going to the 1D only models. There are three different industrial Ethernet protocols on these units: Profinet for Siemens, and Ethernet IP for the Rockwell Group, and Modbus TCP for whoever still uses that. There is PC emulation software that comes with these units. It's included with them. You can also download it from the Banner website. And that also includes an emulation software. So you could practice with this software without actually being connected to a physical barcode reader. The Ethernet versions do have a web server monitor function. So open up a browser, any browser, type in the IP address of that particular unit, and you will get a monitor screen. It's the built-in web server, and you have different options to see the images and some statistics and things like that. There are two discrete inputs and three discrete outputs on the unit. Normally, the inputs are used for triggering the unit as the barcode presents itself in front of the reader itself. And the Series 3000 is IP65 rated. They do come with push-button programming, and this is just a top view of the unit. What you can do with this is really at steps 5, 6, and 7 here. When you get into the aim function, you'll notice that there's two words with each one of these settings. There are two functions for these LEDs. The ones on the left, and then of course the ones on the right when you go through setup. So when you go to step 5, what it does is in the Series 3000, it puts a laser crosshair down on the area where you expect to see the barcode to help you to aim this thing when you first set it up. When you go to the next step, which is called setup here, what it does is it tries to get the optimal exposure time and gain values in there so that you get a good image of your barcode. And then, of course, the last step is a learn function. And when you go into that step, what it does is it actually learns the symbology of the code that you have in front of it. All of the ABR series readers, when shipped from Banner, are in a default setting where they will want to read ECC 200 2D data matrix codes. That's just the default setup. You can set these readers up to read a number of different codes, but when out of the box, it wants to read ECC 200. So if you are looking at some code other than that, whether it's a PDF 417 stacked or one of the linear codes, you can put it down in front of the camera, go through this push button programming process, and it will learn to read that particular symbology. It doesn't do, and I want to reiterate this, it doesn't do a match at that time. So it's not going to just pass and fail whatever data happens to be inside that symbology. This push button programming is used to teach a particular symbology, and it's only going to learn one. If you put a different symbology under there and go through the learn process again, it will overwrite the symbology that you taught it previously. There are ways around that in the software, in the programming software, which I will be getting into here right after this quick PowerPoint. Then there is the Series 7000. This is a slightly larger unit. If you look at the dimensions on the right, it's roughly 3 inches by 2 inches by just slightly under 2 inches in depth. This unit is used more for direct part marking, which is what we see more and more all the time with barcodes. A lot of stuff is now laser etched or pin stamped, or a lot of different methods to get that code directly put on the part. If we look at the back side of this, again, we do have the focus dial on the side. One really nice feature of the Series 7000 is that you can rotate the connector block 90 degrees. If you're in a space limitation situation, you can rotate this around so that the cables will come out the back versus the bottom. Again, 2 cables here. These are connectors on the bottom of the 7000. They're M12 style connectors. The power, serial, and I/O connector is a 17-pin M12. The Ethernet is a decode 4-pin Ethernet. Features in the Series 7000. All of these units are both serial and Ethernet units. There are no USB versions of the Series 7000. All the resolutions are 1280 by 960, so that's the 1.3 megapixel imagers, CMOS imagers in here. We do have more lens options with the 7000. You've got 6, 9, 12, and 16. And there's also a 9mm autofocus liquid lens option. When we do go to real-time programming here, I'm going to do, when I get into the software, I have a unit set up here just to my right, and it is a Series 7000 with the autofocus liquid lens in there, so I will touch upon that when we get into the hands-on portion here. All the 7000 read 1D and 2D codes. Again, the same industrial Ethernet protocols that the Series 3000 had. PC software and emulation is the same. It has a built-in web server, the same number of discrete I/O. One of the differences is the lighting options here. I didn't mention on the Series 3000, there are 2 white LEDs for illumination on either side of the lens, right in the front of the unit, which puts out a fair amount of light, especially if you're reading labels or something of that nature. When we get into direct part marking, a lot of those marks look good. They have high contrast. Many of them do not. And so the Series 7000 has a different lighting function here. And so we have multiple LED functions in the Series 7000, and I'm going to go into those a little bit deeper here as I get a little farther along. And this is rated a little higher than the 3000. It is IP67. Again, push button programming on the top of this unit works the same as the 3000. Again, it's used to teach the symbology of the code that you put in front of the unit. Illumination features. The model on the right is their red LED model. And as you look at the part numbers, you do have different options here. And you can see that it's got 8 different LEDs, or red LEDs, around the lens, and that's a fixed illumination. And those LEDs are quite bright, so you can get out there, 9, 10 inches with these units. And of course, they had a number of different lenses that you could use. The other models have what we call multiple LED options, and that's the two on the left. That's really the same model, but on the very left image here, you see that it has a series of red LEDs around the lens that are for center illumination. And then just to the right of that, you have the blue dark field illumination type LED illumination that is good for reading direct part marking, especially laser etched. Now, in order to use these blue LEDs that create, again, a small dark field illuminator, you're normally going to be in kind of close, probably within 1 to 2 inches of the code to make that lighting scheme work well for you. Another feature in here, and this slide does not depict it very well, but what I'm trying to display here is those red LEDs around the lens in the multiple LED model can be cycled on and off in the software. So for instance, in the upper left-hand image here, you see that the red LEDs are on only in the top left sector. There's 4 different sectors in here, each containing 6 LEDs, and you can turn them off independently in the software, so you can have just 1 or 2 or 3 of them on, or any combination of them turned on or off. The bottom row shows the same feature for the blue LEDs that act as a dark field illuminator. You can turn on just the left and right side, or just the top and bottom, and so that's all configured in the software, and so you do have some control over that. And one of the reasons you might use something like that, if you're looking at a surface, and in some instances you just have to put this barcode reader where you need to put it, you may be getting a reflection that you don't want over the code from one of these illumination scenarios. And so you may be able to go in there and turn off one section of the LEDs so that you're not getting a reflection right over the code that you want to read, and the rest of the LEDs still illuminate the area well enough and create contrast for you to read that particular code. This happens more on highly reflective targets, like say a plastic part or a plastic bag, something of that nature, or direct part marking on say aluminum or stainless. It can be dot peen or laser etched, and so you're going to get some reflections off that, depending on the angle of attack that you use to mount the reader compared to the barcode. And so lighting geometry still comes into play when you're trying to get rid of reflections, but you do have some options in here in case you have to put this in a particular position. This is a list of codes that these readers can handle, and as you can see, there's a lot of 1D codes that it takes care of. The most common being code 128. Code 39 is a very common code. You do see PDF 417s quite a bit. As we get down near the bottom, UPC in the EAN family, you do see those occasionally. 2D codes, of course, data matrix, and the QR codes, which handles both standard QR and the micro QR codes. You're starting to see those more and more in parts, at least I am. And then, of course, there's some postal codes that, I'll be honest with you, I've never really gotten that involved with. Don't see too many applications for that, at least from my end of the business. This is a list of all of the different models that we have in the ABR, and so the top 5 are the USB serial versions, and you can see that there's 2 models there that are 1D code only. I've got that highlighted. We go to the second set, and this is the Ethernet and serial versions of the Series 3000. And again, there's a couple of models in there that do 1D code only, which can really knock anywhere from $600 to $800 out of the price of one of these readers if you're just using 1D, and you don't anticipate having to use this for 2D codes down the line. Be aware that at this time, we cannot do field upgrades to get a 1D code only model to read 2D codes. There is some hardware changes in there, evidently. And then, of course, at the bottom we have the Series 7000 readers, and there's 8 different models of this, and they all have the same resolution. They all read both serial and Ethernet, and they all do 1D and 2D codes. The only differences really are the lenses. You can see the first 4 have 4 different lenses: 6, 9, 12, and 16. And then, of course, the bottom 2 are autofocus liquid lens versions. And then you can see that some of these have the red LED, and some of them have the multiple LEDs that have the built-in dark field illuminator. I do want to mention, too, that in the Series 3000s, if you look at the bottom unit of each one of those 2 categories, that is a polarized lens on the front of that particular Model 3000, which can knock down some of the glare that you would get from, again, highly reflective surfaces like plastic bags or some type of a metal target. And that's that for the PowerPoint. Let me get out of this now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the software, which is the Banner Barcode Manager, which comes with these units. Right now it's searching for any cameras that I have connected via Ethernet to my PC, and it finds my Series 7000 reader. If I just double click this, we get in there. Now there's several different ways to get into or features that we can program from this screen. Normally I'm going to go into Open Device Configuration. We do have a presentation mode, which I will discuss a little bit further down the line here. We do have a built-in monitor mode right in this software. It's actually this icon up here at the top on the right, which takes you out of the configuration mode, and you can just monitor the unit. And then, of course, down here we can jump into the web monitor as well. But you can also jump into the web monitor simply by opening up your browser and typing in an IP address. When you're in the configuration software itself, the cameras only allow for one person to be connected to the camera through the configuration software. So if somebody else is trying to get in, if you've got this on a network and you're connected to it via this software package, other people that may try to connect to it will not be able to. If you're using the web monitor, you can have up to 4 different people monitoring one particular piece of hardware at a time. I'm going to open up the device configuration file right now, and I'm just going to go to the default. And we get in here, and of course right now it's taking pictures, and if I put my hand under here, you can see that picture update. I'm going to pause that right now. Depending on the bandwidth we're using here and where you are at your location, some people may be updating and their screens a little quicker than others. So I'm going to try and take this somewhat slow. Be aware this is live. I'm using a live camera here. All the examples I'm going to use this morning are going to be live. None of this stuff is canned. I could easily put together a canned presentation where everything works perfectly. I don't really like to do that because, let's face it, in the real world, things don't always work perfectly. And so maybe I'll have trouble with some of these codes, and you get to see the procedure that I have to go through to try and correct that. I think that's a better way to display a product to people than to go ahead and just do a completely canned presentation. This does have emulation software, and I have used it. And so you can save images from whatever you're doing, and you can store them in a file, and then you can open up the emulator version of this software and use those canned images. So I could really have presentations where everything works perfectly, but again, I don't really feel that's the right way to go. I like to do things live and take a chance. So right now, when you first get into the software, the first thing I want to point out is there are different levels of users. I don't really like the term user, but when we get in here, when this software is first installed on your PC, you are going to be in what's called Installer Basic. You're going to be an Installer Basic user. What I have is I've opened it up in the Installer Expert, because what that does is it opens up more features in this software that, frankly, I just want to talk about a little bit. And then there's the User Basic, and this one is very basic. You basically just get to watch, no pun intended there, you just get to watch what's going on with the camera. You don't really have a lot of input or things that you can change from the User Basic level. But I'm in the Installer Expert user right now, and that's where I'm going to stay. So when I first get in here, we've got this area that we're in now. It's called Automatic Setup. And so if I turn this thing on live, and it's actually taking pictures over here, and I can put my business card down there, and you can see that, and so forth. So I'm live. I'm going to pause this. And what I'm going to do is these units ship with a test card. It's called a Barcode test card, grade A. I'm going to place one of these under here. Got to make a little room. And so I'm going to put this test card under here. And I'm going to go live so you can see it. And so it's just it's a linear code. Looks like that's probably that's a code 128. And the reason I put that on there is I'm going to go through this I'm in automatic setup, which I normally don't use. I kind of jump to advanced, and you'll see why here in a minute. But if you come over here to the right side of the screen, you can see that there's a gain value, there's an exposure time, and there's just slider bars. And I could, I could change this. I could move this up a little bit and take a picture, and the picture gets a little bit brighter. I can move the exposure time down. It gets a little darker and so forth. But there's also a start automatic setup, which is what I'm going to start right now. So I'll go in here and I'll hit this. I'm going to say, yes, my target is static. It's not moving. If you go into dynamic, you can actually enter some line speeds and things like that to help make sure that you don't get your exposure time too high, or you would get pixel blur on your image. This is a 1D code, so I'm going to just check 1D code here. I'll uncheck 2, and I will come down here and hit start. And you'll notice where these slider bars are right now. They're going to change. This automatic setup is going to go through here, and it's going to, right now it's strobing the LEDs on the front of this unit, and it's trying to optimize what this image should look like to get a good read. This can take a little bit of time. Sometimes it can take just a couple of minutes, and sometimes it can take a lot longer. I don't really want to read that code up there. So let me cover that. I read both of them. I'm actually trying to shoot for this one. So I'm going to say that was successful. I'm going to close it. You can see that it adjusted my gain and my exposure time. And so now if it also set a code in there. It said code 128 over here on the side. This opened up with an ECC 200 code because that's the default when you open up this software. And so I went to automatic setup. It went in there. It set the light, the exposure time, and the gain value, and it's now reading this code. So for people that don't want to get too deep, you do have some avenues here to get this thing out of the box, get it mounted, open the software, and get up and running relatively quickly. Of course, you can also do that with the push-button programming that are right on the unit. You'll notice that the picture's kind of bright. I'm kind of a control freak when it comes to this kind of stuff. I really like my pictures a little bit darker than that. And so I don't like my gain up that high either. And so I may come in here and do something like this and manually adjust it. And because I do that, what I normally do is I will just shoot right for the advanced setup when I get in here. And of course, since I already set it up, it's reading this code over here. One of the reasons I come in here, because if you look over here on the, if I select image settings, I look on the right, I actually get values for my exposure time and my gain. And I've been working with vision systems for a number of years, and so I'm very used to the terms exposure time, gain values, that type of stuff, and I'm very comfortable dealing with these kinds of values, and I want to see them, and I want to know where they are when I set them. So I tend to shoot for the advanced setup, and many of you may wish to do that too if you're going down this road. So right now, of course, it's reading this code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to delete this code so that there's no code in there. And I'm going to take this test bar out because I've already used that as an example. And I will just place another kind of code in here. I tore this off of a water bottle. And so this is just a UPC code. Maybe I make this a little bit brighter. Come in here and I'll take a live picture. And so I can go through the learning process in the advanced setup too. I can come up here and say learn codes, code auto learn. It draws a box as to where it's going to go look for that code. And I do have a couple other codes in there which I don't want. And so now I'm going to come up here and say let's learn this code. And that seemed to happen a little quicker. Of course, it really wasn't the code I wanted it to learn. So, see, live demo. Let's go back in here and try that process again. I'm gonna update the picture and get that code out of there. I'll come in here. I'll do an auto learn. Let's go. Goes through the process. And I'm going to say finish. I'm going to replace the configuration code. And I'll say OK. And so now that's a UPC-A. And it's reading that code. And if I go live, I don't know if you can hear the camera actually has a small, I don't want to call it a beeper, but there's a clicking noise in there that's telling me it's reading it. And if I can put my hand in here and block it and so forth. So this is live and it is reading that code. And of course, this is pretty easy code to read. It's kind of it's a label. So if I come in here and I bend it around a little bit, you can see that it's pretty aggressive. It tries to get in there and and read a code even when you've really not optimized its position. So it's a fairly aggressive reader. We'll throw that out of there now. And so I can also do the advanced learning section right in here. Or I can go in and learn whatever code that is. Even though I'm not in the automatic setup, you can do the same thing in advanced setup. There's just a few extra steps in here. So back to the image area. I mentioned that I had, this was a liquid lens model. So what I'm going to do is take this code again, the test code, and I'm going to go in here, try to block off some of these other codes, and I'm going to take a picture. And so just to make sure that I've got a really good focus, get this code set up in the center of the screen. I'll take a picture. It actually looks like it does have a good focus, but if I come in here, I can do image auto setup. I'm going to pass that because we kind of already did that. I got the exposure time and so forth. But I can come in here and do focus auto learn, and I'll just say start. And so it goes through this process, and now it's adjusting that liquid lens to try and get an optimal focus on this picture. A lot of times, too, you can just take a tape measure and measure the distance from the code to the front of your reader, and you can punch that value in manually. Calibration was successful. I'll say apply. And I'll go back to the image settings area, and you can see that it said that through that process, it determined that the code was 221 millimeters away from the front of the reader. And as I look at this, I've got a tape measure here. That's that's about right. So I get a good focus on that code. So there's the process for the autofocus. All right, there's a lot of stuff in this software. This is a very extensive software package, and I cannot cover all of it in the period of 45 to 50 minutes. So I'm just going to try and touch on some of the nice features that I've discovered while going through this process, just to kind of let you know what this package has available to it. What I'm going to do now is we're in the advanced setup, and I'm going to take this code out of here, and I'm going to stick another code in here and learn it. I'll show you one other way to learn a code. This is a very large code. Again, it's a label, and so I'll take a live picture. It's not reading it because I don't have it in the stack. If you don't know what it is, or if let's say you do know what that code is, that's a code 39. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to delete my UPC-A code. I can actually just come in here to the stat code and say, add a code 39. It's going to add the code 39. It's just going to start reading it. So if you know what it is, that's a really quick way to get this information in there so that you can start working with this right away. I'm going to take this big code 39 off of here. And so as long as you see the green box around here, it's reading the code. So if I come in here live and I move this thing around, I don't want to cover up too much of that code. I can bend it up and down. And of course, you do have to see all of the code. But I can start to bend this thing, and it still does a pretty good job of reading it. Of course, at some point, I'll bend it too far and it won't read. I'm surprised it's actually reading that. So that's another way to get the code in there. All right. Let's go to the reading phase. I'm going to stop this, and we'll go over here to the reading phase. Matter of fact, before I do that, I want to add a couple other codes in here. I'm going to add an ECC 200 code reader in here, and I may add a linear. I'm going to add an EAN 13 in here, just so that we can read those codes. I will turn this live again. I will put a data matrix code in here so that you can see it. Yeah, there it is. It's reading that code. And I do have an EAN code in here that should read too, and there's that one. So I've got 3 different codes I can read. Let me go to the reading phase. And in here, I want to point out the fact that we have 3 different ways to trigger this unit to take a picture. Right now, if you look up here at the top of the screen, we've got reading phase. I'm in continuous mode. That's what this icon over here is. I'm in continuous mode. That's the default mode when you set this thing up. And so when I hit play, it just starts taking pictures. Of course, we can't see them from this screen, but it's reading over here. And we go. We do have one-shot mode. which is where you would put a trigger into this thing. And of course, now you can see the graphics are starting to show up in the reading phase. Acquisition trigger is going to be input number 1. And so if I go to acquisition trigger, it's going to trigger that on the leading edge of input 1. Of course, I could pick the trailing edge, and so you've got some logic that you can apply here. The other mode is called phase mode. And if I go to phase mode, this is a very unique mode. I think this one has a lot of power to it. To narrow this down into a short description, what phase mode is it can go in there and you can set up different sequences in here for this reader to try and read it. So for instance, you can set up 2 or 3 different sequences with all different exposure times. Each of the 2 or 3 could have a different exposure time, a different gain value. If it's a liquid lens, it could even have a different focus. So if you know you're going to be getting a package that's not going to be in the same spot, you can actually have it go through the sequence trying these different methods to read the reader. The other thing in phase mode, and if you look up here at the top, reading phase is phase mode. One of the things I like to do with this is I'm going to come over here now and go back to advanced so that we can see it. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to hit play. And I'm going to put my hand in front of the camera. I did hit play, didn't I? Hit play. I'm going to stick something under here. I'm going to have to move the camera down a little bit. All right, so this is why I'm doing it live. So you can see some of the things that I'm going through. Oh, I know what I did wrong. So right now I've got input 1 and input 2, which I'm not really using. So for my phase on, instead of using input 1, I'm going to use a motion event. And for phase off, instead of input 1 trailing edge, I'm going to use a motion event. And so now I'm going to trigger this phase process with motion. And if I go back to setup, what happens here, and if you look over here on the side, these will show you the last pictures that it has taken. And so if I come in here and I hit play and I do something in front of this camera, like put this card down, you can see that it took about, I don't know, 5 or 6 pictures here on the side. It sensed motion. The imager in this reader is looking for a change in contrast in the field of view. And when it does, it automatically starts triggering and goes through all the different phases I may have set up. Now, right now, I only have one phase set up to read this code. And so if I take my card out, it saw a change in contrast. If I come over here and throw this thing in here, it automatically starts reading it, and you can see it took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What it is it's going to read for 2 seconds. What happens in phase mode though is the first time it gets a good read, it's still going to take additional pictures until the 2 seconds are finished, but it's actually going to send the code out just once to wherever it is you want to send it to read. So this is a nice little feature because if I just take something else and put it in there, you can see now I'm reading this EAN code, which is what that is, or I could come in here and place another code, and now it's the ECC 200 code, and it's reading that. And that's just happening because I'm just putting something in there. If I put my hand in there, that's a change that it sensed, and it will take those pictures, and that's how the phased mode works. So that can be pretty handy if things are going to change from time to time. Back to the reading phase, reading mode. What else did I want to cover here? Okay, I covered continuous mode, one-shot mode, phase mode. While I'm in here, I do want to show you that we do have, this is where you find the industrial Ethernet setups. And of course you have Ethernet IP, Modbus TCP, Profinet. So if I were to just pick one of these, what it's going to do is it's going to come over here in the graphic format, and it's going to set up my Profinet word or 8-bit register. I think that's an 8-bit register, yeah. And so it's going to set this up, and of course we can come in here now and we can assign that bit to be some kind of function. I'm not going to get into the industrial Ethernet because, to be honest with you, I haven't really gotten into that too much yet with this reader. I've only had this about 3 or 4 weeks. And so I'm going to just go ahead and I can get rid of that. I can come into the Profinet and delete, say yeah, and get rid of that. So I just want to let you know that this is where you would find your industrial protocols. All right, let's go to a good read setup. And you can see that by default, I'm reading a combination of codes. And so right now I've got 3 different types of codes set up in here. I got a code 39, an ECC 200, and an EAN 13. And so in order for me to get a pass output from this thing, I have to read a code 39 and an ECC 200 and an EAN 13. Maybe I don't really want to read all 3 of them. I just want to read any one of them. I could come in here and take this ECC 200, drag it into this box, and get an exclusive OR. I can do the same thing with this, drag it over here, and I can just delete these other 2 boxes. And so now, if I see 200 or a 13 or a 39, and it's an exclusive OR, so it either has to be one or the other. I can read it that way. So I do have some logic that I can set up in here. And I'm going to leave that set up like it is. I'm going to go back to advanced, and I'm going to, I'm in phased mode right now. So let me go back into reading phase. I'm going to go put it back into continuous mode, come out of phase. If you look, I still have these set up as an XOR. Go back here to where we can see the image. I'll turn it on, and it's reading it. And it's reading the ECC 200, or it can read the EAN 13, which is what this one is, or it can read the code 39, which is what this one is. And so you do have some logic in there. Of course, most of the time you're going to be sending these codes over to a PLC via one of those industrial Ethernet protocols, and you're going to take care of that situation that way. All right, I see it's a little after 11 already. What I want to do now is I want to show you, that's really all the features that I wanted to show you in here. There are a lot of features in this software. Of course, we can get into data formatting and things like that, but if I do go to data format, we can set up these codes and use different delimiters and headers and things like that. If you're going to send a string over to a PLC or some other device, this is where this would be done. But if I go back to advanced setup, you can see that if I go to console, this is just a little terminal emulator. If I come in here and hit play, and I'll hit stop, you can see that it's spitting that information out. This code says 34.1.19.2.5, and there's the code right there. It's on the bottom of this thing. It's actually up here in the top too. And so if I put a different code in there and trigger this, you can see that this console is reading different things. So we can get the data out here and make sure that it's reading what we want. I'm not going to do it right now, but I did want to show you under the reading phase that if you wanted to a match. This is the learn code reading phase. I'm just trying to remember where the match code was. Good read right here. This icon would be for match code. So if you know you're going to see the same code all the time, and that's what you want to see, you don't want a different product getting in there, we can actually go in here and do a match code. And we can actually set up to do a match code via a remote input. One of those discrete inputs could do it, or you could do it via one of the Ethernet protocols. And so this is where you could go in there and set that up. So right now, what I want to do is go back to advanced setup, and I want to show you some different codes that may be difficult to read. So right now I've got these 3 codes in here. I'm going to delete all 3 of these, and I'm going to go to a UPC code because I've got a real example here. I'm going to turn this on live real quick, pull these codes out of here. I've got a bag. It came in, and it's got a code on it. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is a UPCA code. And it is. And so I'm going to go live here. And you can see that it's reading this code. And I'm going to come in here and try to mess this thing up. I'll curl the bag around because let's face it, you're coming down the line. This thing isn't always going to be laying out here perfectly flat for you. And you can see that there are some situations where it's not going to read. You do have to see all the code in there somewhere. But it does try to go in there and pull as much information out of a bad code as you can. If I come in here and smack this, now it's flat again. So I just wanted to show you that you could come in here and read some difficult code presentations. And of course, it can be in any orientation, where this is where an imager-based reader, when reading 1D codes, works better than a laser line reader, which is going to have to pass that laser line all the way through these bars in order to get a good read. Here, not so much. So that's, it's reading that code, and even a laser scanner may have a little difficulty kind of reading that one because it's kind of crumpled up in there. I'm surprised it's actually doing as good as it is. But it's a good barcode reader, and they're good algorithms, and it does a good job. All right, now what I'm going to do is stop this, and I'm going to show you one of the more difficult codes that I've had to try since I've gotten these readers. And so I happen to know that it's an ECC 200 code, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that in there. And I'm going to go ahead and put the part under here. This is a metal part, and it is it's got black oxidized. It's a black oxidized part, and so I'm going to go live. And it's hard to see, but the code's right here. And so what I'll do is I will go to image settings, and I'm going to brighten this thing up just so you can kind of see where it is. I may want to move my reader a little bit. Let's see, let's just brighten it up so you can see what the code looks like. I'll knock this up to about 700 on the exposure time. And so now you can see it. Here's the dot. It's a dot peen code on a black oxide part. It's just a metal part. It doesn't show up very well. Right now the focus is a little blurry, so I'm going to manually change the liquid lens in here and see if I can clean it up, and I did. So now you can see this code. It doesn't show up real well. Let me pull it in here a little bit closer. But it's there, and so what I'm going to show you now is some of the filtering that we can do on codes. It is an ECC 200 code. And here's my ECC 200 box where I'm going to read it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this in. This doesn't really help me out. I'm just doing this so that you can see the procedure I'm going to go through to get this code to read. And so here, now the code has to show up inside this red box to read. It's not reading right now. So it's time for me to try and enhance what this picture looks like to get this to read properly. And so if you look right up here at this icon, I do have some filters that I can add to this. And so I'm going to highlight my code parameter over here. And I'm going to go up and click on one of the filters. And by default, the filters that it adds are an erode filter. If I go over here to the right side of the screen and hit the pull down arrow, you can see that I have a number of different filters that I can apply to this to try and clean this image up so that the barcode reading algorithms can do their job. And so this one, erode's not going to help me here. Erode is to take away white pixels. I actually want to add white pixels. But I'm going to come down here and do a deblurring tool because I've found so far that that really kind of does help me bring out some of the features. And so I don't have to move these, but I'm going to be nesting these filters, and I want you to see how I'm nesting them and how they work. And so I got a lot of garbage in here that I really don't like in this image. So I may go back here and I may drop my exposure time down to, I don't know, let's drop it down to about 350. We'll knock some of this out here and see if we can get rid of some of this noise. Yeah, we got rid of some of it. Maybe I take the gain down a little bit. Let's just drop her down to, I don't know, 12. See if that cleans it up a little bit. Yep, got a little bit more there. Maybe I drop that down a little bit more, maybe a 10. And so I'm trying to get the code to jump out and get rid of some of this background noise in here. And so that did a pretty good job. Maybe I'll drop this down to 340. All right, that looks pretty decent. So that filter kind of did its job. There's still some noise back here, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this filter, and I'm going to add another one, and it'll be up above it. And so I'll come in here. Of course, it's going to start out as an erode, and I really want to smooth this out a little bit, and so we do have a smoothing filter, which can take out some of that background noise. And again, I'm just going to pull these in so you can see how they're nested. And so down here, I go to this. We're still not reading it. But I did get rid of some of the noise in the background with the smoothing filter, and the deblurring filter kind of pulled those white pixels out for me a little bit. I need to enhance them a little bit more. And so what I'm going to do now is right after the deblurring filter, I'm going to add one more. And you can see now that they're still nested. Here's the erode filter, which I'm going to want to take that. Let me find my deblurring filter. Smoothing is farthest one out. This is deblurring. This is erode. So I'm going to just pull this in so you can see where it's nested. Okay. So my smoothing's on the outside. Then my deblurring filter is inside of it. My erode filter is inside of it, and then my code reader is inside of it. Now my erode filter, I really want more of a dilate. I want to enhance those white pixels. And so I'm going to pick this, and maybe I do it a couple of times and see if I can pull that out of there. And then I'm going to go back to my barcode reading algorithm, because I've now pulled that code out of the abyss to the point where I might have a chance reading it, but my decoding complexity is set on low, so maybe I bump this up to, maybe I bump it up to high, and it's reading it. Actually, I might actually bump this up to very high to use all the power in that algorithm. And so now I'm pulling that data matrix code out of a very dark background on a very dark part. And so I'll take a new picture. Matter of fact, I'll go live so that you can see this. And I'm going to move it around a little bit. Turn it to the right. And it's tracking that fairly well. Turn it over here to the left. And you can see, the axial non-uniformity is really starting to take over on this code. It certainly isn't a nice square. And occasionally it's going to miss a read in there, but it did a nice job. It pulled that code out from something that it didn't look very good to begin with. So the point I wanted to make here was we do have an array of filters that we can use. And I'll hit this pull down menu one more time so that you can see the different ones. Erode, dilate, open, and close. Those are very typical vision, what we call pre-processing filters, or in some cases they're called morphology filters, because we're morphing this image into something that's more desirable for the software tools to do their job. We do have a contrast stretching. It's reading it, so I'm done here. Let me just show you what some of these do to the image. If this contrast stretching, if we go in here, it works pretty good on a bag. And you can see it pulled that out. It's not going to work for what I'm wanting to do right now. I just wanted you to see what some of these features do to this. Those two don't do a very good job for me at all. We do have a black enhancement. White enhancement, again, and you have to try these on the different targets to try and get the feature that you're interested in, which is actually the code, to come out there and do their job. So dilate actually worked the best for me here, and I actually dilated twice and did a medium, which adds more white pixels to what we already had, and this is what we got. All right, it's 20 after. I've covered just about everything I wanted to in this seminar. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put my I'm going to delete all this stuff. Let me delete these filters real quick and get back to a raw image. And I'm going to go live. And here's my business card. And so if you have questions that you'd like to ask me, let me put that under there. It's got my my email address on there. It's got my cell phone number on there if you wanted to call me and ask questions on this. So this is how you can get a hold of me. You can also call us here at the Dayton office, 800-228-2790. My extension is 249. If you do have additional questions on this, just give me a call and we'll take care of it. Other than that, I'm finished with this this session today. I want to thank everybody for attending. There's another one next month. We do these every month, so please check our website and see if it's a subject that you're interested in. And once again, thank you very much for attending.